US are able to invade Greenland. They already have a base there. They have their soldiers on the ground per the agreement with Denmark. There's a strive for independence. There's 6 parties in the upcoming elections in Greenland. 5 of them are in favor of some form of independence. If there's a trade war between Europe and the US, the patriotic thing, of course, is to defend our interest, to defend Europe's interest.
Hello, welcome back to the Brussels Signal Studio. My name is Justin Stairs and our guest today is Anders Vistisen. Now, Anders is a member of the Danish People's Party. He is also a member of the Patriots for Europe group, which is a right-wing group and a right-wing party from Denmark. And he has become famous. On a Brussels scale, anyway, let's put it that way. He has become famous recently because of remarks he made about Donald Trump. Specifically, he told Donald Trump to F off. I won't repeat the whole word. But anyway, thank you for coming to the studio, Anders.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk a bit about that. Well, I mean, Greenland has obviously been in the news. It was in the news a month ago and it's back in the news as we speak because the United States president said yesterday that the US, will acquire Greenland one way or the other. This was a speech he made in front of Congress, and he seems to be fairly intent. This follows conversation he's had with the Danish Prime Minister, which was evidently a disastrous conversation last month in which he put pressure on her to basically give up Greenland. I know that you're a bit of an expert on Greenland. Now, and obviously not very happy with the way things are going. Now, it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, and we've talked about this before, but the Greenland people do want some kind of autonomy, if not necessarily independence, but they are or have been moving in that direction. Is that correct?
Yes, there's definitely a big outcry in Greenland for some sort of independence. They struggle to figure out how that should be formulated. It's the world's largest island with a population of 50,000 people. So there's a lot of competences that they struggle to be self-reliant in. But there's a strive for independence. There's 6 parties in the upcoming elections in Greenland. 5 of them are in favor of some form of independence.
Right. Okay. When are those elections?
It's later this month.
Okay, and so let's say there is a move towards independence. How could that work? Would there have to be some kind of vote on independence?
Yeah, there is home rule legislation agreed between the Kingdom of Denmark and Greenland, and they have the right to call a referenda, and then there will be a negotiation if there's an outcome in favor of independence. But I think it's too early to say that it's going to happen because for most of the Independence Party, they struggle to formulate how to do this with being economically self-reliant. So 40% of the Greenlandic GDP is a subsidy from the Danish state. And while opinion polls say that there is a clear majority who wants independence in Greenland, the same majority says that they don't want to lose the standard of living to gain independence. So for the Greenlandic independence movement, it's a sort of difficult exercise to make it likely that they can come through this economically without losing the standard of living.
Right, and by standard of living, you mean, for example, the schools and the hospitals, that kind of thing?
Basically free healthcare like you have in Denmark, free education, schooling, and so on and so forth, but also the human capital. So, for instance, 40% of the health services in Greenland is covered by temps from Denmark, like temporary staff coming in, helping out. Many of the government positions, trained people in academia, lawyers, social science, and so on and so forth, are also coming from Denmark. So they struggle to have the human capital to fill in the functions.
Okay, now, but Mr. Trump, President Trump has said we need Greenland for national security and maybe even international security. We're working with everybody involved to try and get it. I think we're going to get it one way or another. We're going to get it. Is he going to get it?
Military speaking, of course, US are able to invade Greenland. They already have a base there. They have their soldiers on the ground per the agreement with Denmark. But I think it would be a step further than we are used to from sometimes unpredictable precedent to see them invade a NATO country by military force. The Greenlandic independence parties have said that the independence parties have said they don't want to become American, they want to become independent. So in reality, I think it's difficult to see how he's going to get it. But of course, he can strengthen the ties and make Greenland more dependent on America when it comes to security, when it comes to trade, when it comes to economy.
But in theory, if the people of Greenland voted for independence, Denmark would respect that vote, correct?
Yeah, most of my parties believe that the kingdom should stay united, but we are not the majority. Most of the parties have said that they will respect a request for independence, but nobody really believes it can be achieved in the short term. The big question in reality between Denmark and Greenland in this question is the Greenlandic independence movement says that they would continue to be subsidized by Denmark after independence, where all Danish parties are saying, no, if you get independence, the subsidies will end.
Okay, and that's understandable, but then I guess that would be an ideal opportunity for the US to step in, right? They vote for independence, Greenland sends no more money, and Trump says, don't worry, we'll step in.
But basically, there is no realistic scenario where Greenland will have true independence. They will always need a caretaker entity. Right now, it's Denmark who does some of the heavy lifting. Of course, other countries could do that. Canada could do that. The US could do that. But Greenlandic independence, in the sense that we understand the word, is not a realistic prospect. And that is part of the problem here. That is the politicians in Greenland is struggling to define what they want. And what I have tried quietly to say to the Greenlandic people is, if you look at the way the overseas territories are treated in the US, if you look at the way indigenous people are treated in the US, and if you look at how you're treated in Denmark, do you really believe with that 200 years history in the US that you would get a better deal with Trump than you do from Denmark?
Right, I remember you saying that before. Go into a bit of detail. You're talking about places like Puerto Rico or...
yeah, the US Virgin Islands.
Virgin Islands,
which was formerly Danish. We sold them off actually 100 years ago.
Right, so there is a precedent.
There is a precedent, yes. That was also done under duress. It was during the First World War, and the Americans told us we were neutral during that war. They said, come defend it or sell it. And, we were not really in a position to go anywhere, so we sold it.
Realpolitik.
Yeah. But basically, if you look at them, they have been American now for 100 years. They are not a state, so they cannot vote in presidential elections. They don't have a voting member of Congress. They don't have a senator. And if you look at the level of development, it's not really the standard you're seeing in the US in general. So I think there's not really a compelling argument that they are treated very well by being part of the US. But they still were part of conscription. Many per capita more Virgin Islanders died in the Second World War than many places in the States. So you can say they have a quite bad deal. They have all the disadvantages of being American without any of the benefits of voting.
So your message to Greenland is be careful what you wish for to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Okay, and since you infamously, told Mr. Trump to F off, what have been the consequences for you? Have you got lots of emails? Or?
We got a lot of traction on social media, more than I would have expected. I think by that it's probably the most popular Danish political film on TikTok, Instagram, and so on. Overall, I think my impression from my colleagues in Europe has been very well. They understand that when you're a patriot for Europe or a patriot for Denmark, Danish interests come first. Have some pushback from the MAGA movement in the US. But I think that goes to a more general point that is something we on the right in Europe have to contemplate in these years. And that is, even though we share a lot of the same analysis as the MAGA movement and Trump when it comes to migration, when it comes to woke, I don't think we necessarily should become a mouthpiece or someone who explains Americans' positions in Europe. If there's a trade war between Europe and the US, the patriotic thing, of course, is to defend our interest, to defend Europe's interest. And I think we can also see that in a number of issues. So I think we should agree with Trump when we agree, but also be able to stand in our own right when we disagree.
So you don't regret telling him where to go?
No, I think it's hugely offensive to tell, Denmark is a NATO ally. We have been allied with the Americans for 75 years. We've bled in Afghanistan, we've bled in Iraq to a higher number than even the US did per capita. So I think we have been a very reliable, trustworthy ally. And a little bit as I saw in the UK, a lot of people took offense with the comment from the J.D. Vance that certain European nations had not been to war for 30 or 40 years. Of course, Danish people take offense. Then we have been a very good ally, and we have done a lot. We came to America's aid after 9/11. We think that should count for some respect now.
Is NATO breaking down?
I don't think so. I think that NATO, even without America, if they decide to withdraw or become less reliable, is the best place to secure our common defense. If we look at the northern fraction of NATO, which as a Dane, I'm most interested in Poland, Baltic countries, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands. I think we are more than capable to make a trustworthy defense against Russia. Russia has the economy of Italy, and we are more than capable to defend ourselves, especially if we can get the British on board with their nuclear arsenal.
Right, but that's not necessarily NATO. That could be a subset of NATO, couldn't it?
Yeah, but I think we also need to look. I think it should be within the NATO framework, because there you have the military structure to cooperate on the northern flank. But I think we should be honest that there's different perspectives on this in Europe, and it's much geographically defined. When we look at opinion polls, we see certain countries not being very afraid of Russian aggression, especially when you go to Greece, when you go to Bulgaria, when you go to Cyprus, when you go to Hungary, Slovakia. You're seeing some big continental players having it mostly in the mouth, not so much in the action. We're seeing France talking a big game, doing very little. We're seeing Italy doing the same. We're seeing Spain doing the same. But where we see alignment and will to act is in the northern part of Europe. And of course, we will defend all NATO countries, but we have a primary responsibility to defend the northern flank, because that's where we're vulnerable. And there it's very good to have Poland as an ally. It's very good to have Finland, who can conscript up to 700,000 soldiers in 3 months or so.
But that's a defensive, you're talking about defensive military capability now. I mean, as I understand it, Poland won't send troops outside of Poland.
No.
Finland wouldn't be capable or willing to send...
But that you have a responsibility to defend yourself first. And our primary responsibility in Denmark is to defend NATO. Of course, we will help Ukraine with what we can spare, but it is not a good policy if you are Finnish, Danish or Polish to send out capabilities that we need in our NATO defense. And that's where I think Denmark have went too far. When you donate your entire artillery, it's something you might use if you
might need it.
You might need it. So I think you need to help Ukraine with what can be spared from the NATO defense and what we can buy from our economical strength. But we need a trustworthy deterrent for Russian aggression. And that's also helping Ukraine, because if we disarm Poland or disarm Finland and send the weapons to Ukraine, then we just free up the soldiers in Russia, in the Russian Federation, who has to be on the other side of that border. So I don't think it's a good way to help by, if your house is on fire, you shouldn't donate all the water to the neighbor house.
Because that's relevant now in the context of the discussions that are taking place on what to do to support Ukraine if and when the US pulls out. So, I mean, what is your position? Would you be in favor of sending troops, European troops, to Ukraine?
I don't see that Europe is able to make trustworthy deterrent without American guarantees in Ukraine. What I think we can do is that we can help Ukraine defend itself in a different way, in a more defensive way than we fought in the beginning of this war. It can be made very costly for Russia to make further advances into Ukraine. We would be able to basically keep the Ukrainian defense alive and supply it on a lower level, but on a adequate level from the European side. But we will not be able, without the Americans, to turn the log of war in Ukraine. So it will more be a strategy like we saw with the Americans in Vietnam or in Korea or with the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, that the strategy will then be a bleed-out strategy for the aggressor, that it will be so costly that at some point they will give it up. Not a swirling strategic victory where you regain territory.
Okay, nevertheless, that's still a pretty grim picture for Ukraine, isn't it?
And that is also why I think that these peace negotiations, regardless of how awful Trump's behavior was in the White House towards Mr. Zelensky, I think the best bet is still for Ukraine to try to engage the Americans with these security guarantees, with the administration that the American people have elected. Even though I think that Trump has many flaws and mistakes, I don't see that it's a better outcome for Ukraine to have this very traumatic kind of war being fought over the next years, rather than to see if we can find a decent way to get security guarantees into Ukraine. But let's be honest, 20 to 30,000 European troops not stationed at the actual frontier, but in the hinterland, in the airports and the surrounding harbors and so on, that's not really a deterrent.
Right. Okay. So, will the consequence of the Trump presidency be the creation of a European army, do you think?
I think the European division on this question is larger than some people in Brussels would like to portray it. I think we are lacking UK in the European framework for that. That's also why I say that NATO is the right framework, regardless of how reliable we see the Americans. We don't want to lose Canada. We don't want to lose the UK engagement in our common defense structure. So no, I don't think what we will see is of course, the aspiration is an army. I don't think we'll see an army in a way that it's going to be a functional army. But what we are going to see is a power grab from Brussels, where they try to take new competences, where they try to get away with the veto rights in foreign affairs and security policy, where they are trying to make this competitive structure, replicating the NATO structure in the EU and so on. And I think that will only divide resources, not enlarge them.
Right, it's true. The power grab is underway, and that's what some people say. In fact, that's what the French National Rally says. Do you think the French have been proven right in that they've been arguing for some kind of strategic autonomy for a long time?
They've been saying that since de Gaulle withdrew them from the military part of NATO, so it's a long time coming being right.
Are they going to do their victory lap, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's what Macron is doing now, but he's not proving very trustworthy either. He was the one going to Ukraine, sitting across the big table with Putin. He was the one saying we should not humiliate Russia in the beginning of the war. But of course, what I see this is actually a long-time deterioration of the transatlantic relationship, where Europe many times have let America down, and where I think we have feeded this sentiment in the US that Europe is not a reliable partner, is not a serious partner. So of course it's a little bit of the question about what was first, the chicken or the egg. Have we provoked the American public opinion away back into American isolationism, or are we now left behind by the Americans? I think there's truth to both those claims.
In what the claim that we've let the Americans down, where does that come from?
We were the one killing off the free trade agreement basically before Trump's first term. We're saying, we could not allow all these chlorine chickens coming in. We saw big European countries leaving America behind in Afghanistan and especially in Iraq. And a very posthumous French and German lecturing of the Americans during those wars. And of course, all of these things have created, I think, a rift in the alliance. And I think to a certain extent, the Europeans became overconfident. They didn't see Russia as a threat. I remember when I entered into the European Parliament, I was lectured by German politicians about Nord Stream 2, and that was the mainstream. That was the CDU, CSU, SPD kind of people telling me and my Polish friends that you are seeing ghosts. I was ridiculed for saying we should not make nuclear disarmament of Europe. We should not just unilaterally give up France and UK nuclear weapons, because now world order is changed and so on. So I think Europe has, we have been sleepwalking into this situation.
And of course now tariffs are on the table. Which could target Denmark, I guess, in particular. It's possible, isn't it, to single out certain industries, the pharmaceuticals industry?
Yeah, in theory, it could be done, but most of the Danish export to the US is sort of domesticated in the sense that the factories are in the US and so on. So when we ask Danish industry and they do the numbers, it seems like it's quite difficult to hit our major export markets because it's primary pharmaceuticals and green technology, so to speak. The other thing is actually we have a trade deficit with the US, so we're one of the few European countries who import more American stuff than we export. But it's basically the other way around. If you try to boycott Coca-Cola in Denmark, it's Danish brewery of Carlsberg that you're going to hit because they do it on license and so on. So I think this tariff idea, maybe some of the people talking about it doesn't really realize that a lot of this manufacturing is actually domestified.
Okay, and I'm wondering if tariffs and threats are bringing the European people together into some kind of anti-US bundle, or are they dividing Europe? What do you think?
I think no one have done more to unite the federalist European Union aspiration than the Trump's way of going about this. And I think one of the things that this anti-American sentiment is feeding is also Europe walking away from the US on China, which I think geopolitically is going to be a massive disaster. I think China is going to be the rival that we're going to be worried about in 20 years, and we should do something about that now. But I think what this administration is feeding is, of course, an anti-American sentiment in many European countries, not all of them, but many European countries, and that is going to give wind to the sails of the people who want what they call strategic autonomy. Again, the French vision of what Europe should be and do, and that is, to be in the middle between two adversary powers, China and the US. And I think that's a mistake, but I think Trump have done more for that French dream than any French politician ever had.
Right, they probably can't believe their luck, can they? So you believe that China is posed to be the winner of this?
Yeah, strategically speaking, Russia is in decline demographically, economically. Of course, I think they're set to lose about 40 million people over the next 80 years in population due to very low birth rates and very low living age. But of course, China strategically is placing itself to be the center of a new bipolar world order. And when we fraction the Western alliance, the transatlantic alliance, the only one gaining momentum is China.
Of course, China and the US, economically speaking, both doing better than Europe, which brings me on to the Green Deal. I mean, it's quite ironic in that the politicians I've had here until now have talked about the Green Deal and migration seems to have been superseded by the events of the last couple of months. But nevertheless, economically speaking, we've seen Germany in recession, for example, now Austria, I think, and there aren't many countries doing well in Europe. Do you think that, what is the reason for this? I mean, I've already mentioned the Green Deal because I know people in your party do blame the Green Deal for this economic downturn. Is that correct?
Yeah, of course. It's regulation, and Green Deal is a big part of that, but it's not all of it. It is also the CSR directive, it is the GDPR directive, it's all of this. The Danish liberal think tank called Cepos that said that since 2000, 80% of the legislation hitting Danish businesses and public came from Europe. Only 20% came from the national level. And I think that is representative of most European Union countries. And there is a truth to the old Reagan saying that, America innovates, China copies, and Europe regulates. And that's a big problem for us. And we seem to be continuing doing that. So we don't have any real significant stake in all the new industries. We don't have big tech. We don't have hardware companies to a decent size. We don't have IA. We don't have social media. All of this has passed us by. Mm-hmm. But what we are also losing is our good position in old industries. Pharmaceuticals, we made worse regulation for innovative pharmaceuticals than the US and China, worse patent protection. Of course, that means innovation is moving away. We are seeing that in a multitude of what we can call the older industries, that car manufacturing. It's not big in Denmark, but many places in Europe, they are seeing what harm is doing when you do much higher standards in Germany than you do in Japan or in the US.
Right. And what's the solution?
The solution is what was successful in Trump's first administration for American economy. He never balanced the budget. He never dealt with the debt crisis, but he did deregulate. And I think the benefits of that is what is making America
Is
stronger.
that possible in the European Union? I mean, I have never seen the European Commission go into reverse gear.
No.
What they can do is they say, okay, we're going to make life easier by, instead of imposing that much regulation, we'll cut it back a bit and there'll only be that much. But going deregulation, surely that's not possible. I mean,
it's very no.
I'm showing my bias here.
Yeah.
maybe.
But I basically agree with you. But you ask what the right medicine was, and that is the right medicine. That's
but not possible
let go of,
within the European Union.
It's very difficult, yes. And the problem is that I've never seen a problem so small that the European Commission didn't think that the solution was to deregulate. Everything from the cap of plastic bottles to the curve of bananas or cucumbers or whatever. There's always an emphasis to regulate it. And it always has to be very, very difficult because there's 27 different systems and they work and it's not the same, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And therefore, yes, it's very difficult. So a good place to start is by stopping to add new regulation. So instead of believing in a big deregulation frenzy from Ursula von der Leyen, you could just start saying, suspend the Green Deal, like we said. Don't do it. Don't do more. Take out some of the harmful elements. And you can say the same in other fields like IA, social media. Don't do more regulation. Scale back. But at least, I was taught as a child when you meet a catastrophe, the first thing is to stop the catastrophe. If it's a car crash, make sure that everyone is out of the cars and so on before you start the treatment. So let's start the catastrophe. That should be simple, Ursula. And when we've seen you're able to do that, then let's see how much you're willing to scale back your own project.
Right. Your party does not believe in leaving the European Union, correct?
Actually, we do.
Ah.
So we're the minority in the Patriots fraction.
Right, okay. So in that case, surely the solution is to leave.
Yes, and we but our problem is that we need a majority in the Danish Parliament to come with us on that.
But it's just you didn't mention that when I said what's the solution.
No, because
but you're talking from the perspective of your European Parliament, right? Perspective.
Our aspiration, our estimation is that Europe is so broken you cannot fix it. Not Europe, but the European Union is so broken you cannot fix it. For many years we had the same position as many others. We wanted to reform it. We wanted to go back to the common market. We wanted all of these things. But our recognition from I think 10 years ago was that Europe is a one-way train ticket. It's not a question about changing direction. It's a question about the pace where you get to the United States of Europe. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's fast. Crisis makes it faster, so it's probably going to take a leap forward. But it's never scaling back. It's never going in a direction of Europe of nation states.
Which brings me on to the Patriots for Europe group. Now, obviously, if you're not in Brussels, you might not have heard of the Patriots for Europe group, but it is a group of like-minded MEPs in the European Parliament who are right-wingers. I think that's fair to say, and they come from a variety of different countries. Now, what's interesting is I wonder how many people in that group are, Anders is the chief whip, which is not the same as a chief whip in the UK or the US, right?
Unfortunately not. That would make me more powerful.
That would make you a very powerful person. But so would you like to explain what that role entails?
It's more like making sure that there's political coordination. So I cannot make the French vote like I want them to, but I can try to find the coordinated line. Who can? That would be Tower of Babel's kind of task, right? But what I can do is I can find a common line that unites most of our 86 members. I'm obliged to say that we have the third largest group. It's very important in Brussels bubble talk, but our 86 members we're trying to coordinate. But just as equally important, I think, is to unite with the two other right-wing fractions, the ECR group.
That's the
and the ENS group.
Conservatives and Reformists and the Europe of Sovereign Nations, another new group. Because I'm wondering, 86 members, you said, among those 86 members, how many are like you in that they believe that the solution is to leave?
Without being 100% sure, I think I'm the only one.
Minority viewpoint, then, let's say. Because it is true, isn't it? Those who are labelled as critical of Europe or Eurosceptic nowadays, they're not like the old Brits who want to leave. They want to reform
I think
this is the big
I think
message.
I think Brexit was a setback for many, in the sense that we would have liked to seen it better executed. If it was to become a rapid role model for others to follow, and it's gotten very bad press in sort of continental Europe. So I think that took some of the colleagues out of the Leave camp and into the Reform camp.
Really, which bits do you think made them change their mind?
And I think generally it was maybe this thing that there was not a unified strategy from the Leave movement. Some wanted like a Norwegian model, a very soft Brexit. Some wanted a more hard Brexit. And I think that was really the problem with the British negotiation. That was that they didn't really settle on what they wanted. But did they want this like free agent role that people like Nigel Farage and Daniel Hannan talked about? Or did they want maybe like more what Theresa May tried to do, like everything, but we're still in, but we're just a little bit, we just don't vote, but we still accept everything, and you ended up with a strange mix, like being made to do a lot of the things that you didn't want to do, but not being able to get the freedom that you really wanted from it, and I think Britain has to resolve that. They have to find one of those two positions, either move closer like Norway or move further away. To make Brexit a success. That's at least my sort of external point of view.
But the continental Europeans have so far, at least I've hardly met anyone here in the studio anyway, who would say that leaving is the right answer. Even, I mean, the Flemish Vlaams Belang, for example,
No, I think that the realistic scenario is much more a deterioration of the European from within, in the sense that they're simply trying to bridge too much. And they don't accept that Europe is a very diverse beast, and there's my position has always been you can have a very broad cooperation with many countries about very little, or you can have a very deep cooperation about very much. So I could probably cooperate with Norway about a lot of things without hurting my self-interest, but it's more difficult with Greece or Cyprus or Spain for a Dane. And probably vice versa.
Interesting. Okay, let's talk a final subject then. Let's talk a little bit about migration. What's your position?
What we say is we want qualified migration, so we would like not to have what we call MENAP migration in Denmark, so basically from Islamist countries in the Middle East and North Africa, and we want it to be legal. So we want, in Denmark we have what we call a blue card arrangement and job card arrangement, meaning if you have a high-paid job as a specialist, you can come in. If you want to come for our benefits and don't want to work, you should stay out.
And what about asylum seekers?
Our preference is to have a third country model and do it through the UN system. So I think in Britain they call it the Rwanda model, not so popular anymore.
So this is processing them outside of the country?
Basically what we say, if you try to come illegally, you should never be allowed in. We will protect you somewhere else. And then what we could do when we have this illegal migration dealt with is we are open to take in UN quota refugees, but only the most needing, the most vulnerable, religious minorities and so on, that we can cope. In Denmark, it would probably be around 500,000 a year.
500 or 1,000?
Yeah, 500.
Not 500,000.
No,
right?
no,
right,
probably
okay.
be a little bit.
And so this is the Rwanda model, which Italy seems to be moving
towards. Yeah, they call it Albania model.
And do you think that this is gaining traction? Because haven't I heard of other EU leaders talking about this model now?
But the problem is it's all talk. You cannot do this if you don't take, combat the European Human Rights Convention, if you don't amend the Convention of the Stateless in the UN, if you don't look into the Geneva Convention of Refugees, you cannot implement this model in Europe. They can in Australia, where they've done it successfully, like they showed it worked. They can in the US, close the borders. But due to the convention framework that European countries, in my opinion, quite stupidly have signed up to, we're not able to do it. So any political leader who says we can do this without saying we have to amend the convention is a liar. And most of the people who are saying this,
including Maloney, then,
to some degree, yes, because she doesn't want to combat these root causes. What the Albanian model is lacking is this last element, what I said before. If you try to come illegally, you don't enter. Because as long as you would be able, even in a third country model, like the Albanian model, as long as you allow people in to transit from Albania back to Italy, if they gain asylum, then it doesn't work. The Australian model worked because it was without exemption. So what they said is if you come as a boat refugee to Australia, even if you have the need of protection, it will be done in these island nations that they made the deals with. And that was what made the 99% drop from one year to the other.
As in, you'll never get in.
As in, you never get in. Because, of course, even if you take legitimate asylum seekers, most of the people seeking asylum doesn't gain asylum. So they are welfare refugees or people without a convention claim to asylum. But even if you just say you allow in the UN refugees or the de facto refugees, it's still a number that Europe wouldn't accept. It's still millions of people, and many of them from relatively nearby areas in the Middle East and North Africa. So as long as you have less inclination that you can get in illegally, then the human traffickers will continue to send people.
In fact, there's one other subject I want to bring up with you, and that is treaty change. This is the process whereby Brussels gets more and more power on issues such as foreign affairs and defence now. Where are we with that? Do you think it's going to happen? Are we going to get a treaty revision?
This crisis might trigger it. It has been in the making since the last mandate. The European Parliament called for it, Germany called for it, France called for it, the European Commission President called for it. Naturally. And if we look at history, when these forces have combined, big countries, Germany, Commission, Parliament, and they have called for a treaty revision, it's come. Maybe it's not taking 1 year, maybe it's taking 5 or 7 years. And the big obstacle to treaty change is gone. UK is not there. So the only country who tried to scale back integration, big country, is gone. So yes, I think you're going to see the Brussels elite trying to make a power grab out of this.
More power.
Yeah, out of this.
Let's leave it there. I think we've gone a bit over time, but thank you anyway for coming into the office.
Thank you for having me.
And the studio, and thanks very much for watching once again.